Good morning, everybody. Before we begin, I'd like to do a welcome to country. So I would like to acknowledge the traditional landowners of the Ghana country, which India and Jaameeta are presentating on, and the Walgurukba and Bindal country, which I'm on currently, and also all the country that you guys are on. And thank you for coming on to the seminar as well. And I'd also like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and to any cultural events that are happening and business that is in effect.
Thanks for that, Jada. I'd also like to welcome you all to our August webinar hosted by the Wellbeing, Health and Youth NH&MRC Centre of Research Excellence in Adolescent Health. I'm Professor Philippa Collin. I co-direct the Young and Resilient Research Centre at Western Sydney University, and I lead a stream of research in the YCRE on the ethics of engagement, which is really about how do we make youth participation in health research and translation the norm for better policy and practice, which is very fitting considering today's focus. I'd like to also acknowledge our funders who are listed on this slide. And we would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognise continuing connection to land, waters and culture. I'm joining today from the lands of the Barramadigal people of the Darug Nation and extend my respects to elders past and present. We thank them for their custodianship and care of country over tens of thousands of years. I also want to welcome any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us here today, and young people whose health and wellbeing we all work towards. And we invite those of you joining today to acknowledge the Aboriginal lands on which you live and work in the chat. So today's webinar will be recorded and also made available on the YCRE Community of Practice, which can be accessed by our website. So feel free to look back on the content and also to share with anybody you know who should know about the webinar today. It will be available. Our website has a lot of other resources, journal articles and previous webinars relevant to adolescent health research. So please check them out if you're not already familiar. Last little bit of housekeeping. So during the webinar, the audience will be muted and video will be switched off. If you have anything to say or would like to ask a question or a clarification to our presenters here today, please use the chat panel on the side of your screen. We'll have a lot of time for discussion, question and answer session at the end of the presentation. So please feel free to pop your comments and questions into the chat as we go. So it's my absolute pleasure to welcome and introduce our presenters today. Firstly, Dr. Jaameeta, who is a non-Indigenous global health researcher and epidemiologist. She's spent the past 14 years working in partnership with a diverse range of communities in the developing world to make access to quality health services more equitable for all, but particularly for young people. India Shackelford is a Ghana and Ngarrindjeri woman and a passionate advocate for women and First Nations people within STEM. She is a Bachelor of Science with Honours graduate and a current Doctor of Medicine student. As a research assistant for the Waldra Peningai Aboriginal Health Equity theme at the South Australian Health and Medical Research Institute, or SAMRI, India endeavours to better understand factors leading to inequity within health outcomes, particularly in relation to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. And it's also my pleasure to welcome and introduce Jeda Lanoy, who is a Gumangir and Bunjalung descendant from the mid to northwest coast of New South Wales, as well as a Bira, Nauru and Jura woman from the far north and central regions of North Queensland, and South Sea Islander member from Tana, Vanuatu. She's currently living on Walgurukaba and Bindal traditional lands. Jeda is driven by confidence, resilience, and teamwork, which forms a tree of support for oneself or a cluster to succeed. It's great to have you here, all three of you. Over to you.
Thanks, Pip. I hope everyone can hear me now. Great. So I'll dive right in. Thank you so much for having us. We are.
Well, apologies. It looks like Jaameeta's being cut off. See if here you are again.
Sorry about that. I keep going off stage instead of advancing my slides, despite having a practice session. So yeah, we're very excited to speak to everyone today about the Roadmap project, and I'll dive right in. I will give a really quick overview of what we're doing on the project, and we'll then hand over to India and Jeda so that they can share their perspective on conducting health and wellbeing research as young Aboriginal women. They're going to share their reflections and experience as well as their aspirations. So I think a really good place to start would be to reflect on why focusing on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health and well-being is important. And I'm sure most of you are aware that young people between the age of 10 and 24 years make up almost 1/3 of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander population in Australia. They are important for safeguarding cultural continuity. We also all know that adolescence is a really eventful time in a person's life. There are multiple transitions occurring in the physiological, cognitive, and social spheres. We also know that disparities in health outcomes are still persisting. In an earlier synthesis of available population data on Indigenous adolescents in Australia, we found that about 80% of mortality among Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander adolescents could be classified as potentially avoidable within the current health system. And most of this was potentially preventable as opposed to potentially treatable. It's also well acknowledged that the health and well-being needs for these young people are also largely unmet. And perhaps one of the reasons for that might be the absence of a national strategy guiding action in this space. Most responses to date follow a very siloed approach, focusing on specific diseases or conditions. And so responses are very reactive in nature and fragmented. And I think this also plays a role in the data that's available, which seems to be very, very heavily skewed towards health outcomes and risk factors, but a little shy on social cultural determinants, which are really, really important in shaping health and well-being. So what we're aiming to do on the Roadmap project is to respond to this gap by working with young people to create the first comprehensive national strategy for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health and well-being. The Roadmap will define priority health and well-being needs, but also identify evidence-based responses to these needs, and hopefully also highlight some of the existing knowledge gaps that are there. As you've probably guessed, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander young people are at the heart of the Roadmap project. We have a governance group consisting of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander young people between 16 and 24 years. There are 2 representatives from each of the states and territories across the country, and we also have 2 co-chairs that lead this group of very dynamic and talented young people. They play a diverse set of roles on the project, contributing from everything to articulating the project vision and mission, to weighing in on how to connect to young people, to providing input on data collection tools and strategies. We're very early in our stages of data collection, and actually we're on the precipice of our national launch of the online survey, so stay tuned. Our governance group will be involved in analyzing and interpreting the data, and will lead co-design of the roadmap and all the series of outputs that will be created for action and advocacy as we go along. We try and acknowledge the diversity in skills and interests and lived experiences of our governance group members, and are constantly trying to create opportunities for our governance group to be involved in the project, in addition to governing our work, which is their central role. We've got 3 main mechanisms in place at the moment to try and support this. We have capacity development funds built into the project for each member to access on an annual basis to support their professional development and to enhance their ability to lead and govern us. We also have in-house knowledge exchange sessions, one of which we ran last year in preparation for incoming data. The sessions built on their knowledge and skills around qualitative data analysis to support more meaningful engagement with the data. And then, of course, we also have periodic meetings with the entire group to discuss progress, as well as to get them to weigh in on the various aspects of the project. And we also meet more frequently with the co-chairs to ensure that there are multiple mechanisms for communication. And one of the most important things is that the governance members receive remuneration for their time. So I will quickly just tell you about how we're going about building the roadmap, and then I really want to hand over to India and Jeda because they should be the ones talking about this stuff. So as mentioned earlier, the roadmap will feature health and well-being needs identified as priorities by young people that we're speaking to, and will also include evidence-based responses. We're going to try and capture adolescent and stakeholder perspectives on needs and responses through primary data collection, primarily qualitative data. And we will also include selected indicators from available population data sets to match up the needs that are identified by adolescents and stakeholders, particularly around social and cultural determinants, where a lot of the work needs to be done. And then we will also source some evidence-based responses by conducting scoping reviews in order to integrate all the available evidence out there. We are speaking to a diverse group of individuals to try and really capture the spectrum of perspectives on health and well-being needs, as well as responses. But of course, central to this group are the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander adolescents themselves. But we're also speaking to service providers, to community members, that includes leaders, parents. We will also try and speak to policymakers and researchers. So really trying to get multiple perspectives on what is needed. We will channel young people's views in 3 main ways. We are about to launch our national anonymous online survey targeting 13 to 24-year-olds. The survey consists of a handful of very short questions to really try and understand what the main needs and issues are from young people's perspective, but then also to try and tap into what they think keeps them healthy and happy, but what gets in the way, what kind of supports they would like to see. So we'll be exploring that through the online survey. But then looking into the same areas in a bit more depth through online interviews as well as online focus groups. From stakeholders such as yourselves, we want to explore what programs and services or interventions are on the go and being tested, what's working really well, what more you think can be done. And through online interviews, we will ask you what you think the priority needs for health and well-being are, and how the young people that you work with through your services or supports know about these services and supports, what's working well, what's not, and any recommendations that you might have that we should integrate into a national strategy. We will then run co-design workshops with stakeholders that we will co-facilitate in partnership with our governance members to try and start creating the roadmap and all the associated outputs. This will bring together everything from all the stories that young people have shared with us to stakeholder views, as well as selected secondary data that we've pulled together, including a little bit of policy analysis. All right, I'm going to stop there and hand over to my colleague, India.
Jaameeta, thanks for giving that excellent introduction into the Roadmap project. Since our presentation is about youth perspectives, and apologies, I'm going to be readjusting my earphones here. I'd like to talk about the project from my point of view as a young Ghana Ngarrindjeri woman who's studying and researching in the health field. And I'm going to talk to a few points from a report done by Wellbeing, which is a charitable organisation. And in 2020, they did an inquiry looking into young people's involvement in health research. So when Wellbeing was looking at health research relating to young people, they identified all of these positives. Youth participation actually improves research quality. So young people are able to better identify questions and methods that can relate to people of their generations. They also identified this added bonus of young people really being able to have that access to peers and communities in research. Recruitment and engagement can be really difficult, especially working with those younger generations. So they noted this as a bonus. And they also noted from feedback and from conducting this review of the literature that young people tended to comment on feeling more empowered as well as developing valuable skills in this field. And I would have to say, certainly as a young person involved in research, I agree on all of these areas. I think there's definitely a need and a bonus for including young people in this kind of work. And it can be really valuable, not only as a learning opportunity for us, but also in terms of the kind of quality of research I think we can get out of such projects. So the same review looking into different health research involving young people noticed that while adolescents were often involved, at least in the papers they looked, in terms of research design and data collection, there tended to be more of a focus on young people's involvement with these areas as opposed to activities relating to setting the agenda or translation. And similarly, while in some of their research they noted that adolescents had decision-making power, it tended to be less than their adult counterparts. And I think part of this certainly has to do with the fact that academia can be really, I think, strict in a hierarchical sense. So we have our students who tend to be our young people, and above them we have this really strict order of master's qualification, PhD, postdoc, associate professor, professor. So I think that can play a role in terms of this decision making. And inclusiveness was also something that they noted. So when reviewing these papers, they couldn't always, and apologies for the lights going off, they couldn't always tell in terms of diversity of gender, ethnicity, socioeconomic status. They weren't able to relay this kind of information about the young people involved. And certainly in terms of health topics, if young people aren't included as part of that real agenda making and decision making process, I think there is the mismatch for research being done, might not really align with youth priorities, especially relating to health. And just to comment on this through a First Nations research point of view, historically, we are the most studied people in the world. And that has unfortunately produced this really negative connotation associated with research, has been quite long lasting. So I'd like to acknowledge the impacts of colonisation and invasion upon our peoples and upon the research landscape. And it's really for this reason, particularly, that research, especially in the health context, when we can get into really personal and important issues, so the utmost important that research relating to First Nations people is led by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. So really that nothing for us with that. certainly in terms of our project that I'm going to be speaking a little bit more to, I think it's a really exciting and powerful opportunity to be able to work with our young people, both as research participants, researchers like myself, and governance group members like Jeda. And this is once again emphasising that today we're going to be talking about the involvement of our governance members, our researchers, and I'm speaking from that researcher perspective. So certainly from my point of view, I think that one of the strengths to my involvement in the project thus far has been, I think because of my age, and of course, depending on the person I'm speaking to, can be a little bit easier to relate. It's not so long since I was in school or working or studying. So I think that can sometimes make it a little bit easier to form those initial connections with people and start a conversation. And from my point of view as well, it's been a really valuable opportunity to learn more about research in a health perspective and to begin that capacity building and networking journey. It's also placed me in a really special, I think quite a powerful position to be able to listen to the stories of our young people, as well as stakeholders and service providers, so to learn from their stories. And it feels pretty amazing to be able to say that I'm actually working towards making a difference for my peer group. I think that's pretty amazing to be able to speak to, advocate for. I put in a picture of our project team. So we have an amazing team, which is co-led by, I think it should be Professor now, Peter Azzopardi, who's a non-Indigenous researcher, and Seth Westhead, who's an Awabakal man, and of course an Indigenous researcher. And one of the reasons I've highlighted this is because our team is excellent in terms of we have a diversity of skills, genders, and representation. But it's also, and you can see everyone with the purple line identifies as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander. I think it's really important to have that representation and leadership in all levels. So from my position as a research assistant through to research officers, CI, and all the way up to that co-lead level, we have that representation and that strength of skills as well as cultural knowledge to draw upon. I'm going to speak just a little bit to the governance, but more so from a perspective of a researcher who's working with this governance structure. And I think this is a lovely photo from our face-to-face event. So we have our team members as well as most of our governance group featured there. So governance group implementation is certainly not without its challenges. It's something that needs a lot of investment in terms of time from researchers and also from funding. So we've been really fortunate in our grant, our NHMRC Ideas grant, to have already built into it the ability to remunerate and financially support our governance group for their really valuable time and input in decision making. So I guess the blues are some of the things that make it difficult, and the greens are positives of what we're working on to achieve this. So certainly our remuneration and ability to support our governance group through activities like Jaameeta discussed, such as our knowledge exchange, learning some of these research skills, has been really valuable. Again, in the blue, I touched on briefly earlier the fact that research can have that real hierarchy in nature. I think that can make it a little bit difficult sometimes to incorporate structures like youth governance. And I think something that we've been working on within our project is making more flexible roles and really working to acknowledge the strengths and skills, certainly from professional qualifications, but also the strengths of being within the age group and of cultural knowledge and understanding. So the fact that we all have a diverse range of experiences, skills and input that we're able to place within the project. And another point that I'm certainly proud about with our governance group is we have a good range of representation, not only from young people living in different states and territories, but also in terms of gender identity and diversity, people who are neurodiverse or members of the LGBTQ+ community, and people with different interests and levels of study. from high school to work to university. So those are all things that I think make this project really rich in nature. And the black points at the end, I think all of these facets will hopefully lead towards us creating or advocating for more responsive policy. And it's certainly going to lead to an endpoint of more upskilled young people, as well as this really amazing ability to learn from one another in different contexts. I'm going to hand over to Jeda to talk about our youth governance perspective, and I think you'll also be able to hear in a video from some of our other governance members as well.
Yep, so before I present my segment for today's presentation, I'd like to present a video made during our first face-to-face interaction, just presenting the other governance members and their perspectives.
Young people are like the future, right? So, you know, a third of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are between the 10 and 24 age bracket. And so with such a huge collective of people in the one age range, it's important that we get people from that range to actually drive this project forward, as, you know, this project will be directly affecting them as well.
Without having young people's voices, there's not going to be any change. Yeah, we are the future, and the young ones coming after us as well are going to be the future too. So it's crucial to have young people involved in every discussion.
It's important that we lead it, so you get to hear our voices. But yeah, I'd like to be that voice, because not many people in the Torres Strait, they stand up and speak out for what's going on.
I feel like young people kind of get pushed aside and ridiculed for having something to say because, oh, you're not old enough to have an opinion. Yeah, and then when you get older, you don't really feel like sharing your opinion as much because when you were little, you weren't listened to.
I think other young mobs should be involved because we all have very diverse lived experiences, and it allows us to capture a bigger picture with more detail. So yeah, the more the merrier.
I think it's important because young mob, adolescent Indigenous and Torres Strait Islanders, they need a hand. Everyone needs a hand, and I think it's time for them to get given a hand.
Because young people are like the next generation, you know? It's good to hear their stories because they're going to be the leaders one day, and you want to listen to what the leaders have to say and stuff like that, because then you can help guide them, you know?
I think it's important because we're young mob now, but we're not always going to be. We're going to grow up and then we're going to be you know, the researchers and the people in charge. So it's really nice to get this experience early on and to hear, you know, to have our voices heard and to be listened to and to have discussions and exchanging knowledge with people who have had experience in this already, so that we can learn from them and that, you know, we can be the researchers of tomorrow and the health professionals of tomorrow.
Beautiful. So yeah, that was just a video of our youth governance members and their perspectives on the roadmaps. And now it's my time to share my governance perspective with you as well. So nothing about us without us. Youth governance through the National Roadmap for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Adolescents' Health. I'm going to introduce myself once again for all of you. So my name is Jeda. I'm a Bunchalang Gumbangia Baraya Juru Nauru woman and a South Sea Islander from Tanna, Vanuatu. And I'm based on Bindal and Mulgarukaba country in Townsville, North Queensland. I'm also the female Queensland representative for the Roadmaps project since 2021. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that I'm one representative of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander experience within the community. I do not speak on behalf of all communities, but I am valid. My experience, work, lifestyle, and housing is where I use my experience to influence my viewpoints to assist in the design of the project. So to channel the experiences and needs and expertise of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander youth people, the Adolescents Health Platform team at Warralapringa in Samri have formed a national youth governance group to lead the roadmap project age 16 to 24 for governance member involvement. We have a vision of acceptance and embracing diversity to increase in future for celebrations and supporting others in elements of well-being and creation. I've had the chance to be involved in all aspects of the roadmap project, which have contributed to my personal growth and skill development, as well as enhance my exposure to matters related to health and well-being. The Roadmaps project team has also created a safe space, as India had spoken about before, for all of our governance members to influence the image, operations, evolution, and processing of our project to help identify the priority needs and actions that are important to our young people in our communities through collection, analysing, and processing data from our client base, which ranges from the age of 10 to 24. Today, I'm going to be talking about the inclusion of cultural versus national exposure, connecting the world, and youth involvement creates empowerment. So I, as an Indigenous woman of Australia, I am strongly connected to my cultural groups and lands, and I see a vision for inclusion of cultural exposure within the national mainstream to help those in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities find grounding in times of need and connectiveness with their identity. Torres Strait Islander people are the people of the water, but Aboriginal people are the people of the land. And I aspire to connect people of the water and lands through this project, which is gifted to us in such a unique way with having our representatives not only from the mainland, including Tasmania, but also the Torres Straits. And what this does for us is it's to join all the communities together to provide a powerful sense of identity, pride, and belonging within the community. And I see that the Roadmap project can assist in connecting young people to action, just like it has with the governance members. Nowadays, there is less exposure on country with our youth groups, unless obviously you live on country, but that's not always an option in these times. So it's very important for us to have that kind of cultural connection to our country within the modern world. And within this, it's also there's also been quite a lot of movement throughout the national exposure that includes cultural focal points, and that really does focus on our youth. And this is why it's important to also have youth in such a Indigenous community and identity like orientated organization. So through the vision and integration of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture, I seek to connect traditional healing and culture to the ways of the Western world. More exposure to the world of traditional ways and stories within the Western mainstream is a pathway for the modern world that needs to be travelled in order to assist the younger generations in their struggles with medical limitations and restrictions. Within the Western system, we as a community find balance, reassurance, and strength to defeat any offences that our people or our culture can face. But having more of a cultural standard into that will also assist those with the connection to their elders and also their ancestors as well. It's also my personal It's also my personal hope that the Roadmaps project will be able to expand the scope of health and well-being beyond the medical models in the Western world, one that can represent all our communities and cultures. I'd also like to say I wish to fulfill my position as a representative to create pathways to make services more accessible to those who are divided by the long stretches of land or those who are surrounded by the waves and currents, to connect and not segregate culture. The Roadmaps is to connect the world, to connect the nation. The team makes the time to explain to the local people in the area of works and organisations who we are, what we do, and how members of the Aboriginal community can be involved in our program through branches within our project. Many facilities and organisations have created a roadmap for each state and territory, but we wish to take that to another level. We want to connect all the states and territory with a platform of support and services to assist individuals in their needs and wants within the health platform. Our governance members have also participated in Indigenous workshops and conferences for exposure and collection of other organisation services throughout the years in development. This project was created to have 2 representatives from each state and territory, as well as the Torres Strait Islands, to help with youth orientation and missions of success for consistent youth participation and social positioning. World Connection builds communities across cultures and beyond boundaries and borders, providing a much needed insight about the works and what might not work for that particular community. As such, their ideas and worlds can influence peers, adults, and even policy decisions. Introducing youth involvement creates empowerment in production and assessment of the adolescent's health and well-being. Youth involvement has created a voice projection, a voice of recognition and empowerment. The youth are shaping the world as we know it, with exposure on almost every single issue, and we are no different. The roadmaps and our youth workforce works closely with the researchers and the SAMRI team to produce results that will assess in the image we created and the knowledge that we can obtain and the journey we can present to the people around us when we come face to face in these type of situations, such as a seminar or to any kind of conferences around the nation. Also, as a group that has exposure to the age of 16 to 24, we have many members who are a part of our project that have created a portal for recognition and existence in the physical and mental limitations, the LGBTQIA plus community, and multicultural Indigenous communities as well, such as myself. And we strive to assist and connect and support our nation in almost every way possible through the roadmaps. So yeah, we're slowly getting there to our goal, and it's been wonderful so far. And yeah, we're just waiting for it to really take off with the survey, as Jaameeta has said.
Thanks, Jeda. So I think that gives you a really good snapshot of how we work together on the Roadmap project, bringing together diverse views, different styles, a variety of strengths and interests, and genuinely celebrating everybody in a spirit of true pluralism. We work together to create a safe environment for everyone so that everybody can express their unique perspectives and we can really harness everyone's creativity. We try and encourage each other, share opportunities, and give everyone room to grow. This process takes patience, curiosity, humility, and flexibility, and it requires having genuine respect for everybody's positions and ways of expressing. But we're hoping that through this unique partnership with young leaders, we will be able to do a good job in capturing what young Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders feel are priorities for their health and well-being. But we do need your help as well. So as I mentioned earlier, we are speaking to stakeholders such as yourselves to understand more about the work that you do and what you feel needs attention. So please get in touch with us if you'd like to share your views through an interview. We also need your help to let Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander young people know about the Roadmap project, and so that they can have their say as well through one of the 3 ways. So let's have a listen to the governance group calling out to young people to take part in our upcoming survey. I've also got the QR code there, so when you download the slides later, you can share that.
Together.
Have your say now.
We need your voice. Your voice matters.
Now you mob, be deadly, take the survey.
Be dirty and take the survey.
So if you do work with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander adolescents, please do help us spread the word. We are conducting We are conducting interviews and focus groups in addition to our National Anonymous online survey. This QR code on your screen right now links that to an expression of interest form, and we've also included our website and social media platforms. Thanks. I'll hand over to Pip.
Jaeda, India, Jaameeta, thank you so much for that fantastic webinar. This is such an important project, and hearing about the approach, how you've I guess, deeply embedded the principles of collaboration into the governance of the project is, yeah, I think there's a lot that we can all learn about how we might improve and shape our own research, and certainly that's something that we've been very interested in, is how do we support, I guess, young people, but also policymakers and other researchers to adopt similar approaches. So very much looking forward to hearing more about the work as it unfolds and accessing some of the amazing knowledge, insights and resources that you're putting together. We've got a few comments and questions already in the chat. So I'll start with Ediani, who has said, thank you for a fantastic presentation. A question for Jeda. It was so interesting to hear about how you're building strong connections among the governance group. Is this something you actively aim to extend to other young people? And how do you do this? Is it through conversation, activities, or in other ways?
Because I do have a native title for two of my groups, Naro being on the Whitsundays in Early Beach, and Barai, which is over in Charters Towers down to Mackay. I do feel very strongly, especially about the cultural exposure, where people, and for some people, it's really nice to be on country, to feel grounded in that kind of sense. So I have been able to tell people that they should go out onto their country and they should just take a moment to introduce themselves to that country as well, to really feel the embrace of what was there at the time, because ancestors are a very powerful thing, and so are spirits as well, and you can really feel them when you're on country. And it's kind of been proven with, if you go up to Arnhem Land or up to Darwin even, there's a lot of people who, when they're feeling in a tough type of space, when they go out onto country and they do acknowledge themselves on that country, they can feel a sense of calm, and they can actually feel very collective and very surrounded in a safe place. So I do aim for people to obviously go out on country, and also to be proud of who they are. There are a lot of people who say, like, they're from this type of area, but they don't know what their family ties are. But I think it's powerful that even if you know who you are, you should present that to everybody. And that can also join with how you're saying conversation as well, in your question. That can strengthen somebody. There can be people who are unsure because they don't know who they really are, in that sense of their history. But if you can have a conversation with that person, they're going to stretch out to you and they're going to want to talk to you about those type of things, to meet you in the middle. And when they meet somebody who is so connected to land or who's so passionate about these type of things, they will open up to you and you'll be able to pretty much empower them to really think about themselves and to really be honest with themselves as well. And activities that you could do, there's simple things. You could go to NAIDOC and you could talk to the traditional landowners on where you live. There are a lot of communities and a lot of elders who are willing to teach you as long as you show them respect. And that can also help you with gaining that kind of information and also getting that support from those elders in that community, I would say.
Thanks, Jada. That was really comprehensive, and I think some of what you said might relate to this next question from Maya, but it's a little bit different. It's and any of the three of you might like to respond to this, or all of you. But Maya asks, what is your advice for non-Indigenous organisations to be effective allies to support this work that you're doing?
I'm happy to start. I think this might be a good one if we're all happy to speak to it. I think certainly I think Jada raised some really good points. Whether it's and I guess like it depends if people are working in similar spaces or not. Certainly cultural training, ensuring that if you're doing especially work within health or work that is relating to our First Nations people, but there is a consultation process that people are engaged with politely and respectfully, that you're, I guess, like undergoing training. And I think, unfortunately, in some organizations, cultural safety training can come across as a bit tick box if it's something like online training. I think there's a whole nother side to actually working with people, engaging with communities, and really being open to, I guess, like that two-way learning exchange, so learning from others and taking information in. And again, to what Jada said, I'd also like to acknowledge that we are certainly diverse in terms of our cultures, but also our cultural knowledge and identity, which again, as a result of colonization, there are people who are richer in culture than others. So acknowledging that also we're not uniform in terms of our knowledge and understanding. So really taking that into mind and consideration when working with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Happy to pass that to Jaameeta or Jaeda if you have anything else to add to that question.
Jeda, would you like to go first?
I think another way for non-Indigenous organisations to be effective allies is how India is saying, have some type of cultural awareness program that you're really embedding. But the other thing is, nowadays, there's obviously Zoom calls that you want to take to talk to your bosses and everything like that. So I think as well, if you wanted to be very inclusive, do present, like I said before, do present yourself. So if you know who the traditional landowners are, do say that in your emails or in your Zoom calls, because that's another way where you can support them by recognizing that you recognize that the land that you're on. But cultural awareness training is a must. It is very important, I would say. Another thing is there's a lot of non-Indigenous organizations, such as, for instance, like your normal kind of supermarkets, like how you have Kmart or Coles, that kind of stuff. They make sure that they let everybody know that they're supporting stuff like the Your Voice survey or any type of ranger kind of communities that are happening. Like there's one in Cairns at the moment, and there's a lot of non-Indigenous organizations that are also supporting that. So I think as long as you show your participation and your recognition of the community that you wish to represent or wish to recognize, then that's more than enough, as well as just being inclusive of people, especially if you do run into anybody who is Indigenous, just showing them that respect, because they will show that respect back to you as well.
Thanks. I'll just quickly say that if your question was also about how to contribute to the roadmap and the construction of this national strategy, the best way is get in touch with us and speak to us as a stakeholder, because non-Indigenous allied organizations are also serving Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander adolescent clients. So understanding what your challenges are, where you would like some more support, is also really important.
So a question from Monique, who also says, thanks for the incredible presentation, everyone. But particularly for Jeda or India, how do you balance the impacts of cultural load with your commitment to your advocacy research work? Have you found that you or other group members and researchers sometimes cope with burnout when offering cultural consultancy in this way? And if so, how do you cope?
Would you like me to speak to that first, Jada, and then I'll pass to you? Thanks. That's a really insightful question. To be honest, it can be really difficult. Like I'm super happy and excited to be working in this space, but it can actually be really challenging, whether it's hearing about difficulties that young people are experiencing with their health and well-being. Even I think especially as young people, we sometimes get a lot placed on us, whether it's advocacy, whether it's even with universities and organisations, for example, feeling a bit of pressure to culturally educate others or to be involved with like events and organising activities for weeks like NAIDOC Week or National Sorry Day. So it can be really difficult and really draining. I think certainly for me, having my team and also through work and through uni, having Indigenous collectives with peers that I'm able to, whether it's in a group chat or just meeting for coffee, being able to debrief and talk about this kind of stuff. Because I think it's something we all experience, being able to talk with other young people and also elders or people further along in their career about just like coping there's some business, because it can feel like a lot of stuff for sure. Do you have anything to add to that, Jada?
I would say, like how India is saying, you can obviously get support with your burnout through like a cultural kind of perspective. Another type of thing is I think I do balance it quite well, I would say. There are certain like meetings I do miss out of, obviously, but I do tell them that I am on country for that type of reasons and everything like that. So I think as long as you have a organization or a workforce, which India and Jaameeta are mine, along with Seth and a couple of others, when I tell them I'm out on country, that they're obviously quite accepting of that because obviously not everyone gets a chance, and for some people it's quite a powerful time to have to step away from work. With burnouts, I think the most important thing is looking after your physical and mental health, especially making sure that obviously you're eating right, you're timing stuff well, you're not overbooking yourself. And also just making sure that you're not taking on too much. Obviously, if you can't go to certain places or can't be two places at once, there are places that can offer you flexibility in order to do two different things at the same time, or to take time off at one type of thing and come back to another. One way that you could cope with it is obviously taking a weekend off. You could, instead of going through a work week and going out on country or doing something culturally, you could see if there's an option to do it on the weekend, or you could see if work's flexible for you to do work at another time. Because yeah, as long as you find the balance for it, I think that's most important, and you're also looking after your health and well-being. That's your focal point with the cultural kind of standards.
Thanks for that response, Jada. And I know that you need to go now or soon. So I just wanted to say, if that's the case, thank you so much for your presentation and contributions to the seminar. I think we've got time for one more question. So I wanted to put the question from Kate to everybody. She's asked, what are your thoughts on how to increase alignment of young people's priorities, where they rightly view health as a holistic and multifaceted outcome, with governments and funders who continue to view health in silos and organ-based? So I think that's about the medical model, you know, kind of going to your earlier points, Jada and India, about how we rethink our conceptualization of health through the work that you're doing.
Did you guys want to go first?
You to go first with this one.
Jeda? Yeah? So that's a huge question, and I don't think that's an obstacle that we will sort out by any means. But we're hoping that by creating a national strategy, it can be used as an advocacy piece to make these structural changes. But the other thing that we're trying to do as well is have these conversations with policymakers and decision makers and funding bodies right now, right at the beginning, to understand how their systems work, but also to create a bit of awareness as to where the gaps are and where change needs to happen. So that would be my quick answer, but but very aware that, you know, that sort of systemic change will take a really long time. But early conversations, I think, hopefully will be helpful.
Yeah, I'd just add to that I hope through our project, but also similar ones, that we do establish more conversations between these silos so that there's at least more connections and more communication there, because health and wellbeing is so holistic and so multifaceted. It can be really difficult just looking at one little section of what's going on in someone's life to actually effectively problem solve.
The other thing is we haven't, because we're still in the early stages, we haven't actually came up with platforms or services for particular kind of things. So we're still kind of going through with our surveyings, what are the needs and wants of everybody. So we haven't really finalized them for all these different perspectives, all these different type of elements that actually go into health and well-being. So maybe further down the line, after we've done our national survey and a couple of other things, there may be an opportunity for that to go into a more depth conversation and projection of that. But at the moment, we're still trying to focus on what are the actual needs of our youth before we can finalize focal points to really look at in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I think we all appreciate the focus and the part of the project or the stage of the project that you're at. And so I think we're really keen to continue the conversation as the work unfolds, and to think with you about that question of really shifting the mindset and the structural factors, I guess, which view health and the way in which it's situated within policy differently. Certainly from my perspective, this is precisely the kind of project that I think, is making an enormous contribution to that slow process that you mentioned, Jaameeta, about slowly opening up and creating that change. I just wanted to end on maybe a related question, but also just I'd love to hear from the three of you about what has been the most surprising or perhaps inspiring insight that you've gained from this work to date, and that you'd like us all to take away with us.
Here to start, speaking to young people this day, we've done a few interviews with younger ones from that 10 to 14 age group recently as well. Just how resilient and amazing and surprising they are. They can be experiencing a lot of really challenging things in their lives, but just can have this positivity and optimism and real lust for life. I think, that's something that I think has been surprising and noteworthy.
Thanks, India. Jaameeta?
I thought Jeda could go, but
we give Jeda
that's probably the best. I wouldn't say surprising, but I have to say I've always enjoyed working in this space. But on this project with the group that I'm with and the work that we're doing, it doesn't feel like coming to work. I think about this all the time. I'm just so energized by the group that we work with. Everyone is so creative. There's so many great ideas bouncing around. There's just not enough time in the day to get stuff done. So really enjoy it.
What I enjoy about this organization that we do, the roadmaps, is that we're very inclusive and we're very flexible. And the other thing is, it's a brilliant experience because we're able to have so many people from all different places, such as Ghana country, Laraka country, Kuki-Ulanji, that kind of stuff. It's one of my favorite jobs, I have to say. Out of the many that I have, it's one of my favorites because there's so much going on. We're all treated like a family as well. For instance, some of our members did have children recently, so we've really been able to connect with them when they come on Zoom and everything like that. You see the little babies, but also you see people who, are taking the time out of their busy days, obviously, to come see us on these Zooms. Who are always moving or who are like heavy in university. And the other thing is, I really enjoy that this is such a group and organization that isn't just stopped by the ages. So it's not like, oh, this is a job only for this type of range or for these type of expertise. Like we've got somebody who's 16, who's still in high school, but then we've also had people who have finished their uni degrees or who are like well into their jobs now. So yeah, it's just amazing that we're able to be able to connect on so many different platforms for so many different reasons and still be able to call each other a family and really connect when in need and be available for each other and for others.
I think that's a great point to, I don't want to say end on, because I feel like these are ongoing conversations. I know a lot of people have asked in the chat how they can find out more or support the project, and hopefully in addition to the resources that are on the screen there and the information about contacts, I think Jaameeta, you've directly said please reach out. So I'm sad actually to say that this is the end of our webinar, but once again to Jeda, India and Jaameeta, thank you so much for sharing your work with us today. We wish you well as the project progresses and look forward to getting in touch, staying in touch and learning and supporting this work.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Everyone have a wonderful day and a wonderful week.